What's up? Econ 476 at 205. Dr. Van Weigel, how's it going? Today we're going to be talking about aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Thus, my first illustration, aggregate demand. We got a vertical axis of price level, horizontal axis of quantity demanded. As you can see, there's an inverse relationship. Price level were to increase, demand were to fall. Vice versa, price level decrease, demand increases. This is what we call inverse relationship or negative relationship. Now, the exact definition of the aggregate demand is as follows. A schedule or curve that shows the total quantity of goods and services demanded at different price levels. What we're talking about in the aggregate demand curve is the changes in aggregate demand. And this, entails a bunch of things, and we're going to start talking about, how it affects the graph and the aggregate demand curve, accordingly. So the first thing we're going to talk about is determinants of aggregate demand. Basically, these are the factors that change, the aggregate demand curve. These include consumer spending, investment spending, government spending, consumer wealth, other things, and then price level plays a huge part. So, as you can see on the graph, if price level were to, dramatically increase, without consumer wealth increasing or any other variable factors, the aggregate demand curve would shift to AD3, a loss of demand, and which ultimately would affect GDP growth. Vice versa, if consumer wealth were to increase, would have an increase to AD2, and that would cause, higher demand, lower prices, and depending on consumer wealth, this could also change the GDP in the nation. What up, Econ 205? Holla at your boy, aggregate demand. So we're talking about the main determinant of, aggregate demand change, and that's consumer wealth, as you can tell, how much money each person in our nation has. So if you bring it in close right here on the graph, you can see as consumer wealth grows or declines, depending on, their economic situation, that depends ultimately how much money they will be willing to spend, cha-ching, per price level. So let's say we have a dramatic change in my job and, maybe I hit the lottery. Well, my price level, determined factor won't really matter to the price level the government sets or the market sets. So we'll be more willing to spend, X amount of dollars per price level. So this will ultimately cause a positive shift in the aggregate demand. So the more money we have to spend, the more demand we're going to have in the economy, which will cause GDP growth. And that concludes our conversation on consumer wealth.
What's going on, Econ 205? How's everybody doing? Let's have some fun with economics today. What do you say? All right, I'm going to talk to you a little about the aggregate supply curve in economics. And let me tell you, it is just fantastic. God, I love it. Right here. Every time it hits me in the heart. And what it is a curve showing the relationship between the price level and the amount of real domestic output that firms in the economy produce. And the relationship varies depending on the time horizon and how quickly output prices and input prices can change. And these three time horizons are the immediate short run, the short run, and the long run. I'm going to talk about the changes in aggregate supply. And one of those determinants of aggregate supply curve is the price level. It's very important because a higher price level would cause a company to have a higher output of the items that they sell. And a higher output from a company would also cause a higher profit for that said company. And a higher profit for that company would result in a higher GDP for the entire country and would benefit the entire country as a whole.
These are some examples of the aggregate supply in our economy today.